So law and order remains a big question. And even beyond the political aspect of it, general law and order, robbery, mugging, killing, incidents of rape and sexual assault, these are continuing unabated. Although they're trying to gloss over it by blaming the government that was overthrown 2 years ago, the Awami League government. For every crisis, they blame the Awami League, never the Yunus government, which ruled the country for the interim period. But I think this blame game can only go on for so long. At some point, the government has to stand up and take responsibility. I think the economic situation is in a very, very serious state, and the Prime Minister has to recognize it. What we see is that the Yunus government was definitely anti-business. There's no doubt about that. Even though they have two-thirds majority in parliament, the government is too scared to take the step which may kind of rock the boat, the nice and steady, calm waters at the moment. They don't want to disturb that. But if they don't, if they leave those tough decisions for later, the economy will suffer, and the problems the government will face will be multiplied by many times because of the internal politics, which is currently dominated by an anti-India narrative. So it goes beyond the desire to have a strategic autonomy. It goes beyond that. It is more closer to what you have referred, a hatred for India. So that hatred for India, that kind of attitude is now currently dominant in Bangladesh politics. And it seems that Tarique Rahman is unable to break out of that. They're using Hasina's presence more as an excuse not to have a dialogue. It's not that they want Hasina back to face trial, because if they did, then they would have welcomed Hasina's announcement that she would come back in December to face trial. I think the pressure was not to have a good relationship with India, because the anti-India lobby in Bangladesh, spearheaded by Jamaat Islami and NCP, feared that if Tarique Rahman went to Delhi, then he would kind of be mesmerized by the Indian hosted.
Namaskar, this is Pratim Ranjan Bose, and you are watching Podcast with Pratim. I have with me Mr. Sabir Mustafa. He has been on this platform a couple of times, former head of BBC Bengali service. Mr. Mustafa is joining me from London. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Mustafa, the BNP government has completed 6 months. So your first views, how did it go these 6 months? What are the improvements from the madness that we have seen in the previous 18 months? From there, obviously a political government. So how things, well, the previous one claimed that they are also political. That's a different issue. But so where are the things now? Over to you.
Well, the first thing is the BNP government is a legitimate government in the sense that it was elected. Whether the elections were fully inclusive or not is open to debate. I don't think it was, but that's beside the point. But the thing is that elections were accepted by people in the country and internationally, generally. And as you know, Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India was one of the first. I think he was the first foreign leader to congratulate Tarique Rahman on his victory. So it was not, the election was not contested by anyone within or outside the country. So that makes it one good thing coming out of this, that it's a legitimate government and which promised to restore stability politically and socially. And one of the key elements was law and order. During the 18 months of Muhammad Yunus's interim government, law and order was one of the worst case scenarios, and it was practically a lawless country during those 18 months. So in the first 6 months of BNP, law and order has, to some extent, stabilized. But there are residual, effect of the Yunus era still continuing. We have seen mob violence, very similar to what we saw during the Yunus era, continuing in front of the police, and the police taking no action, or rather taking action against the victims. This happens particularly on August 15, on the anniversary of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's death.
Exactly.
when one or two, not even a mass, but one or two, pro-Awami League people maybe go to pay respect to Sheikh Mujib's memory at his former home in Dhaka, and they get set upon by zealots, and the police just watch. So this is one of the aspects of the Yunus era which still exists, and the government hasn't been able to tackle that. So law and order remains a big question. And even beyond the political aspect of it, general law and order, robbery, mugging, killing, incidents of rape and sexual assault, these are continuing unabated. There's no sign of any improvement under this government. So that's one thing. Economically, I think lot was expected from this government. That the economy was in a dire strait. It was stagnating, growth was stagnating, inflation was high, unemployment was high. Bangladesh was already in the middle of a stagflation. So they expected in the first 6 months some improvement, some movement away from this. But everyone's been disappointed. And a lot of people think, economists are talking about whether ministers in this government are actually competent enough, whether there's enough coordination among them to tackle this. And Prime Minister Tarique Rahman does not seem very concerned. He seems pretty oblivious to all that. So he's letting his ministers carry out their duties, but the ministers don't seem to be delivering. So I would say that the first 6 months, just on the social, political, and economic scenario, this government hasn't really scored very high. Although a recent opinion poll suggested that Prime Minister Tarique Rahman has something like 65% approval rating. But that's the story of Bangladesh. Incumbents always score very high in opinion polls. And so, this is not a surprise. But overall, the scenario is not a very happy one. And the crisis in the Middle East, which happened within 10 days of the BNP taking power, that has put enormous pressure on the economy. And energy is a huge, huge issue now in Bangladesh. Not just industry, which is suffering, but individual households are suffering from lack of gas and, kind of frequent electricity power losses. So this is a very, very poor scenario for the BNP in the first 6 months. Although they're trying to gloss over it by blaming the government that was overthrown 2 years ago, the Awami League government. For every crisis, they blame the Awami League, never the Yunus government, which ruled the country for the interim period. But I think this blame game can only go on for so long. At some point, the government has to stand up and take responsibility, or the people will call it out and say that, by just blaming the Awami League is not putting, food in my stomach or, allowing me to send my kids to schools. So this is a time of reckoning is coming for the BNP unless they really get to grips with the economy.
You mentioned about the economy, and of course, I would have loved to come to that. The finance minister has blamed the Awami League for whatever happened. Now, in my limited understanding, the Yunus government was supposed to start the stabilization, right?
Yeah.
And it thoroughly failed. Not only failed, in my opinion, it has bombed the stabilization process. So, but I heard the finance minister saying that, blaming it that Awami League has emptied the coffers and I have nothing, blah, blah. Same with energy. Everyone is blaming the. But overall, to your opinion, in how serious is this economic crisis for Bangladesh? When Yunus was there, during Yunus rule, rampant action against the industry business, which was linked to Awami League. There was serious credit squeeze. There were incidences. It was not a case of retribution against one Salman F. Rahman or Beximco. It was your largest conglomerate. But then, say, the Gaji Tires, the owners have been jailed throughout, the husband and wife. So they were not granted bail. This is unthinkable in civilized society. So all put together, we saw loads of factories were closed. Then I read a number, 400 factories are closed. Now, Of late, yesterday or today, I read somewhere that due to energy crisis, 900 factories are closed. So overall, how do you see the economic situation? How long can they gloss over it?
I think the economic situation is in a very, very serious state, and the Prime Minister has to recognize it. What we see is that the Yunus government was definitely anti-business. There's no doubt about that. And they kind of camouflaged their anti-business nature by always talking about the businessman's links to the Army League. Now, of course, Army League was in power for 15 years, so businessmen had to have relationship with the government. It's not because they support the government or their ideology, but they had to have a good working relationship with the
More
government.
so in more
Yeah,
so in everywhere, and more
everywhere.
so in Bangladesh.
Yes. So they needed government kind of patronization or consent to do their business. But the Yunus government decided to punish them for what was really a kind of routine action by them, and that was a big mistake because coupled with the lawlessness that brought private investment and foreign investment, to a to an absolute halt almost. So there was no investment. There was, growth was very, growth, the rate of growth just collapsed and inflation rose and inflation could not be controlled. The Yunus government kind of claimed that they had stabilized the macroeconomic sector, they have stabilized the crisis in the banking sector. But now we know that all this stabilization didn't really happen. But so the government seems to be actually opening up its credit sector to businessmen who were shunned by the Yunus government, like S. Alam Group, which has been identified and vilified as one of the key villains of the peace. They're accused of siphoning off billions of dollars overseas. They're accused of looting banks. And much of that may well be true. But the fact is that the SLM group has a lot of energy projects, like the Summit Group, which was also accused of being lackeys of the Army League. So these two groups have a lot of energy projects. Now, because of the energy crisis, the BNP government is actually allowing them to take credit or get credit from the banking system, foreign currency, to continue with their projects. So this is a good sign that the BNP government is not kind of you know, shutting
So it
out.
is more practical.
It's trying to be more practical and more pragmatic. That okay, so they may be prosecuted for something, but their projects, their industries must not be starved of capital, so they go out of business. Because if they go out of business, the loss is Bangladesh's, not just them. They're abroad.
Exactly.
They have their life. So that's a good pragmatic step we see the government taking. Now, how far that will go, and if they continue on this blame game that it's not our fault, it's their fault, therefore what can we do? That's not going to help. And we still haven't seen any move from the government that what they're going to do in the immediate time, what are they going to do to remedy the energy crisis, which is the number one problem
Sir,
at
before
the
the
moment.
energy crisis, before the crisis peaked, only in last 1 week, we heard these SOSs. The
Yeah.
finance minister said that the economy is in bad shape. The energy minister said that they can't recover before 2 years. But until then, the first thing that a government does is identifying its problems and saying that, look, this is the state, so we will take that time. That the government didn't do. Are you right?
Yeah, the government hasn't actually come up with any plan of action. They're saying that they're going to unveil their plan within days, but that's a longer term plan. So they think, or they're saying that this plan will take at least 2 years to implement. So what happens in these 2 years? Are the economy just going to tank, going down? Of course not. They have to do something
Yeah,
to
it became
ensure that
quite a
the
joke that I have a plan quote.
yeah, I have a plan. So, I mean, he was supposed to have a plan before the election. So now, what is that plan? But what Bangladesh economy needs is immediate action, immediate remedial action, particularly in the energy sector. And we are not seeing such actions. So we're still waiting to see what action the government will take to, give relief to industry and households in the short term, in the immediate moment.
Yeah, some of the announcements are actually very confusing. The said that finance minister said that they will go for domestic mining. Fine, fair. But
Yeah,
I just told in my podcast that a mine it takes 5 years to be developed. So
yeah,
even if you do that, that's a long-term thing. In the immediate run, in these 5 years, over the next 2 to 5 years is too long for an economy. So how do you survive? Now
yeah,
that takes
yeah,
me straight to now. So that's the point. Problem therefore is political. The government, in my understanding, the government is failing to identify, or even if it has identified, it is failing to define the problems because of its political constraints. Right.
mhm,
Now, please explain that this is an interesting parliament, which is perhaps the world's happiest parliament, where the parliament, two sides never argue, right?
yeah.
So, in that kind of a parliament, ideally, they can do anything, and the government itself has two-thirds majority, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, why the government is failing to do its job?
Well, this is a very, very interesting point. That is why once some of the economists are wondering whether the ministers are competent enough to do the job. So that's one thing, whether the ministers are competent. I mean, we've seen the finance minister talk about the energy crisis. We've heard the transport minister talk about the energy crisis. We have not heard much from the energy minister, whose only words are that we're in we're in big trouble. So whether he's competent enough to run the energy sector is a
On the
big problem.
contrary, when the country was hit by a auto fuel crisis,
Mhm.
everyone did know that why the crisis had appeared, right?
Right.
I mean, it was a common logic, but he said that there was no crisis of fuel.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is, I mean, they have a habit of being in denial, one, and then blaming somebody else for it. So for the first 6 months, governments spend time blaming the previous government for anything they can't manage. But that's what I said, that there comes a point where excuses and the blame game will have to stop because people expect them to deliver. Now, why is the government doing this or not being able to handle it? I mean, the majority in parliament is not helping them do anything because parliament is not the real functioning parliament or the decision making, or parliament is not holding the government to account, which is what they're supposed to do. Not the opposition, so-called opposition parties, or even the ruling party's backbenchers. Nothing stops the ruling party backbenchers from holding their ministers to account. But they don't do that because they think they're representing their party rather than their constituencies. And this is a fundamental problem in the Bangladesh political system that once you're elected, you think you can't question the government or you can't question your party. But that's not how parliamentary democracy is supposed to work. So this is one of the flaws of the parliamentary democracy in Bangladesh. And so
But
whether you
why the
have a two,
opposition is not going up to the throat?
the opposition is very happy to be in parliament in the first place. They're grateful the fact that they're there in the first place, and so you see them being, as you said, it's a very happy parliament. They want to work together. They
I
want to
think the
share.
world's happiest parliament.
Yeah, and they want to have a share of the pie. They want to have a share of the power, and they do have power. Tariq Rahman has allowed Jamaat-e-Islami and the former student leaders party, the NCP, to enjoy a lot of leeway. For instance, in the India issue, whether he should go to India or not, the most vocal opposition came from the Jamaat and NCP, and Tariq Rahman seems to have buckled under that pressure. So he's allowing these parties to have a lot of sway over policy. So any action which will remedy the current economic issue or economic challenges may be a little, let's say, unpopular. Sometimes the remedy takes time to work, but the initial effect of the remedy, is bad for the, for the body. You get pain, you get fever or whatever, and maybe the government is too scared to take those steps, even though they have two-thirds majority in parliament. The government is too scared to take the step, which may kind of rock the boat, the nice and steady, calm waters at the moment, They don't want to disturb that. But if they don't, if they leave those tough decisions for later, the economy will suffer, and the problems the government will face will be multiplied many times in the months ahead than what they are now.
You referred India issue. Now that's very interesting because of the geography, because of many factors. So India could be the right partner to save the economy or cushion to whatever. Just giving one example. Suppose you need coal immediately, and we have a rupee trade. Suppose you don't have dollars, so we have a rupee trade mechanism. You can approach India, take the coal in rupee. So there are, and it will reach you immediately. So there are, so that takes you, but it is such an interesting situation. A government with 2/3 majority, where the opposition leader, and he is just a kindergarten student in parliamentary politics, Mr. Nahid Islam. So he said, and the prime minister buckled, the prime minister changed everything. So that takes me to the question that whether what is the goal of the government? The governments have goals, right? I mean, you have, so whether the government is basically anti-Indian government, that is their ideology.
Well, the government has a stated goal is to have Bangladesh foreign policy in a balanced way. Their position is that under Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh had become too dependent on India, and India had become too influential and powerful in Bangladesh, almost like a hegemon. So their stated policy is to diversify their relationship, hence the closer relationship with the US and China, and therefore, and creating a distance from India. Now, this is all very fine, and people will understand why, if Bangladesh wants to have some strategic room to maneuver by not being too close to one of the big powers in the region, that is all very fine. But problem with the current government's approach is that you have problems with India, you have need for good relationship with India, you have water sharing issue, you have border problems, you have trade issues, you have an energy crisis, which India can help through giving you or selling you electricity and refined oil, which Bangladesh seems to lack at the moment. But because of the internal politics, which is currently dominated by an anti-India narrative, so it goes beyond the desire to have a strategic autonomy. It goes beyond that. It is more closer to what you have referred, a hatred for India. So that hatred for India, that kind of attitude is now currently dominant in Bangladesh politics. And it seems that Tarique Rahman is unable to break out of that. I'm sure, I think he knows, I mean, judging by his meeting with Dinesh Trivedi, the Indian High Commissioner in Dhaka recently, and the pronouncements that came out immediately after that meeting, and how it changed after a few days. And the statement from the foreign ministry was quite different from what went on before that. So it seemed that something
Not
changed.
Not only that, if we look at the statements and etc., very undiplomatic, very undiplomatic, I should say, where you can say in 2 sentences, you are unnecessarily prolonging it, making it more complex, adding many things as you do the domestic politics kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is more, I think I think the problem is there that it is more driven by domestic politics than diplomacy. See, with that diplomatic approach.
Sir, sorry for interjection, but please tell me, because we are at the end of this conversation. You said that they spoke about balanced foreign policy, right? That was the framework. The rhetorical part was Hasina sold in Bangladesh to India. That is a rhetorical part.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you say a balanced foreign policy, whatever balance you bring in, your primary goal is your own benefits. That is what should drive you, right?
Yeah.
So you tell me that where is Hasina had, by their admission, Hasina had great relation with India, fair. But that Hasina had done the deal with China, and to India's, she even plays China card on Tista issue, right? So I think that was balanced from Bangladesh's point of view. But over here, it is just because you are saying a lot of things just because you won't do something. You will not go fair. Then where is the balance?
Yeah. So in the case of India, I think that is the problem, that they're using Hasina's presence more as an excuse not to have a dialogue. It's not that they want Hasina back to face trial, because if they did, then they would have welcomed Hasina's announcement that she would come back in December to face trial. She's not coming back to go
That
back
way,
to power.
Hasina issue is over.
Yeah. So, but they have resurrected that issue because I think the pressure was not to have a good relationship with India, because the anti-India lobby in Bangladesh, spearheaded by Jamaat Islami and NCP, feared that if Tariq Rahman went to Delhi, then he would kind of be mesmerized by the Indian host or
But sir,
something.
you are blaming Jamaati Islami. But if
Yeah.
we look at the statements, Jamaati Islami has spoken, apart from that Nahid Islam, who doesn't belong to Jamaat, by the way.
Nice. NCP, yeah.
Right. So Jamaat is not saying much about, there is not, I'm not at least hearing much from them.
No, Jamaat is one of the most anti-India force in Bangladesh.
We all know.
NCP is the vocal one because they're younger, and they think by being vocal they gain some leverage over the government, and which they do by shouting, yes, which they do. So Tariq Rahman listens to them. And why he listens to them is a different question altogether. But they're using the Hasina issue as an excuse to stall any normalization of relationship. Now, why would they do that? Because we know that Bangladeshi interests, Bangladeshi interests. If your policy is Bangladesh first, then a good relationship with India is in your interest, because you want a fair deal with the water sharing. You want Indian support in your energy sector, in the immediate time, because India can provide that and you need that. So why are you not giving that up? Maybe they think that this kind of business deals with India will happen anyway, whether Tariq Rahman travels or not, whether diplomatic relationships are re-established or not. Businessmen will come to Bangladesh, they will want to do trade, India will sell whatever Bangladesh wants to buy. So all these things will take care of itself. We just don't want to have a political rapprochement with India. So that's more of an ideological stance rather than a practical Bangladesh first diplomatic stance. So I think the India policy is now kind of being driven more by political, ideological manner than diplomatic, kind of diplomatic way.
So the narrow domestic politics is brought into foreign affairs.
Absolutely. In the case of India, not anyone else.
So if you do that with India, so naturally your other decisions are driven by this factor.
Well, a lot of people are saying that the relationship, the closer.
I mean, suppose when you just to be anti-India, so you will go with, say, Pakistan, right?
Yeah, that's happening. That's happening, and this is one of the major problems of this approach. That in order to balance India, you have close relationship with the U.S. and China. That's one thing. But when you start having intelligence and military collaboration with Pakistan, then obviously Pakistan will want a presence in Bangladesh, which then India will see as a threat. So what Bangladesh does not need is for India to view Bangladesh as a source of threat. Bangladesh does not need that.
But which has already happened. The DGFI visit was quite significant, actually.
DGFI visit to Delhi or
to Dhaka?
Sorry,
I'm sorry, not
the
DGFI.
ISI.
No, RAW visit. The RAW bosses visited Dhaka, so they had some concrete things to share and to expect some cooperation, right? Okay. So that was a very significant visit in my understanding.
Okay, there's a Bangladeshi DGFI delegation visiting Pakistan as we speak.
Yeah.
So the collaboration on the intelligence and defense sector between Bangladesh and Pakistan has really picked up. It picked up during Yunus' time, and it has continued in the same vein under the BNP. So if that takes on an anti-India character, then obviously that is not going to be good for Bangladesh. I don't know if the people running the policy in Dhaka at the moment see it that way, but to me, it seems Pakistan will not be a benign presence in Bangladesh. It will be a kind of a malign presence as far as Bangladesh relationship with India is concerned.
That has been the Pakistan's sole uh, reason for existence. So, so Bangladesh, it seems, has fallen into that trap. And it was very interesting. Your narrative is that your explanation that they think that the trade will happen, everything we will get, but we will keep slighting India. Right? What they did is nothing but slighting. And so that means that they are taking India for granted. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think they think that India needs Bangladesh more than Bangladesh needs India. And I think that's the starting point of their thinking about relationship with India. And because since Tarique Rahman won the election, India has shown far more interest in rebuilding relationship than vice versa. So every time India kind of urges Bangladesh to accept the invitation, Bangladeshis think, or people running the policy in Dhaka, rather than all Bangladeshis, that they need us more than we need them. Therefore, we're going to play hardball.
Fair.
So this Hasina
Hardball
card
is
is a
fair,
hardball.
but being non-courteous is another. So what they did is they are definitely not courteous. There was a courteous extension, invitation from the Prime Minister's level. So the return should be courteous.
Yeah, I think that the current people running the foreign ministry don't have that sense of courtesy at the moment. Now, obviously, there was no need for that kind of language, or even the previous statement they issued, which was not given to India. It was a kind of these are all for public consumption, domestic consumption. That look, we're being tough with India, but the toughness is something going on in the air. You're not really talking. You have to be tough in the kind of negotiation time.
The
When you
two are
negotiate,
different. Being tough on your negotiation and just abusing someone are completely different things.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, sir. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.